I want to bring in Congresswoman Ashley Hinson. She is a Republican from Iowa. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us. First of all, how are you and your staff doing right now? And then want to know what's your reaction to the events of today?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lana, for the opportunity to chat with you and your viewers. I'm safe in my office with my staff. We've been hunkered down for several hours today. I, like my colleagues, were in the chamber earlier today when we started our joint session, and then things obviously quickly escalated. And I think we can all say we're incredibly appalled by the actions of a few today who tried to destroy our democracy. And that's just not the way we do business. That's not the way Iowans do business. And I think the way we move our country forward is by exactly what we're doing now, which is getting back to work and showing that mob rule does not rule this country. We have a distinguished process, a democracy that has worked well for this country for hundreds of years. And that's what I'm looking forward to tonight, is getting back in there and getting this election certified, because it's our constitutional duty to do so. And I think what we have to do to show this country what we're made of and how we move things forward.
And Congresswoman, you have said that the electoral votes must be counted as submitted. What message do you have for your colleagues who opposed accepting the electoral votes? And are you hearing some of those members now change their minds after what transpired at the Capitol?
I have heard some have changed their minds, but I think what I would say is that my perspective was clear from the beginning. We have a very narrow role as
Right.
Congress to certify these electors. We have to count these electors as they were certified by the states. I just in my previous job was a state legislator in the state of Iowa, and so we focused on making sure we had sound election law at the state level, which is exactly as our founders intended. We wanted federalism to be in place. Our states have the right to be able to count these votes at the local level and certify the elections, and they've done that, and they've sent us a slate of electors. We do not have competing slates of electors. So for me, my role is very clear tonight as to what I'm supposed to do. Do I disagree? I wanted President Trump to have 4 more years, and I've said so publicly. But my job is to go in there tonight and certify this election. And we do need to move our country forward. And our colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I think we've seen a lot today about what our country is made of. We've seen truly the worst of times today, and I think we have an opportunity tonight to show people, not only here, but also back in Iowa in the first district, where I have been sent here with a duty to do. This is going to be the best of times moving forward, and we're ready to get to work to do that.
Well, staying on the same thread line for just one more moment, your House colleague and fellow freshman Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina told my colleague Elaine Quijano earlier that she was accosted by a constituent who was angry with her decision to accept the results of the election, the same decision that, as you point out, you also made. How have your constituents been reacting to that?
I think like most things, I've heard perspectives from both sides, and that's exactly what I would have expected to hear. But I have been very clear on my position, and what I ran on was transparency. I do a weekly press call. I've always told people I will be the person who will tell you where I stand. You may not always like it or agree with me, but I think that's what people expect of government, and we need new leaders who can build that consensus and get things done and lead in that way. And so that's how I plan to carry myself in this office. I will always tell you where I stand and why. I think that context matters. That's what voters want, and that's what voters need, especially right now with all of this chaos and dysfunction in Washington, D.C. It's time to get to work. It's time to do the job that people sent us here to do, and that's what I look forward to doing when we're able to get back into that chamber tonight.
I want to read a portion of a statement from President George W. Bush, who called today's events a, quote, insurrection. The statement reads in part, quote, Laura and I are watching the scenes of mayhem unfolding at the seat of our nation's government in disbelief and dismay. It is a sickening and heartbreaking sight. This is how election results are disputed in a banana republic, not our democratic republic. I am appalled by the reckless behavior of some political leaders since the election and by the lack of respect shown today for our institutions, our traditions, and our law enforcement. Congresswoman, what is your reaction to that statement from a former leader of the Republican Party? And do you think that it will influence other Republicans who haven't had the same position that you have espoused publicly about certifying the election results, understanding that it's disappointing when your party doesn't win, but country always over party? What does it mean to you when you hear President Bush say that?
I think sometimes doing the right thing isn't always the easy thing to do, and I think if there's anything we've seen today, it's definitely that's proving true. And I'm looking forward to doing the right thing. I think it's what our country needs right now, and I think former President Bush's words echo true with many Americans tonight, and it's that we do need to move forward. This is not how we do business in this country. Words do matter. Inflammatory rhetoric is not what we need in this country right now. We need leadership, and we need to move our country forward. And so I think the president should have taken actions to address the nation earlier and sooner today. We had someone die at the Capitol today. It was a very real situation. I had to explain to my 8 and 9-year-old today what happened here. And many other families and parents are having the same conversations at their kitchen tables tonight. It's a tough night for our country. And I think what we need right now is that leadership to move our country forward. And so that's what I hope to do for the people of the 1st District here in Washington, D.C. on behalf of Iowans. And I would call on my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to step up, do their duty, and do the same.
Well, you mentioned President Trump in the video that he posted to Twitter. He told rioters in that video that they were special. He also continued to push false claims of election fraud, even while telling them to go home. Congresswoman, are you disappointed in President Trump? Were you disappointed in that statement?
I am. I value the First Amendment. I'm a former journalist myself. I spent 10 years telling Iowan stories. Heartbreak, success, you name it. And from my perspective, there were a few people who came to the Capitol who really destroyed that trust of the First Amendment. There were many people here today who were exercising their right peacefully. They wanted us as lawmakers to know where they stood, and that is their right, and they have that right going forward. I value our Constitution more than anything in this country. And it's disappointing to me that words made an unfortunate impact today on how some chose to execute what their First Amendment right was and what they thought that right was. Nobody should have ever breached the Capitol. It should never have gone that far. And I condemn the people who chose to take that action today. And I condemn the words that incited that action today.
We didn't hear President Trump condemn them, as you're saying. How much responsibility do you think that the president bears for today's violent protests?
Well, as I said, Lana, these protests the protests can continue. That's the right of people to exercise their First Amendment right. But taking that extra step, those words truly matter. And I would expect leaders to lead in that manner where they're not inciting those kinds of actions. And I think that's what we really need to be focused on, is having leaders who are cognizant of the words and what they mean to the people who are listening to us. This is a time for leadership for our country. This is a time not to be fanning the flames, but to be stepping up and saying, look, our democracy is hurting. Our country is hurting. There are legitimate questions about the integrity of our vote right now. There are many people who don't believe that their vote counted. That's our job right now, is to make sure that we can heal our country and take the action that people expect us to take. If we need to change laws, absolutely, we need to be looking at what we can do to make our process have that integrity that people so expect. I mean, I think if there's anything in this country that we value, it's the right to express ourselves, but also the right to express ourselves through our vote. And I think right now that's a trait that we all are looking for an answer on. So I challenge our state legislators around the country to look at their election laws. If there were any questions, they need to be answered. And I also look to our elected officials, whether or not you're in Congress, whether you're in the Senate, or whether you're in the White House, to really consider what you're saying, the impact on our country, and what it means for the future of our democracy.
Congresswoman Hinson, I so appreciate you coming on and being so frank with our viewers, because it's a difficult situation looking at the Republican Party as a newly elected member of that party and doing some of that soul searching. As your party moves forward, what are some of the internal issues that you think that your party really needs to grapple with? It does seem like, in some ways, there has been a division between the Republican Party that belonged to that came up perhaps following the tenets of President George Bush and the Republican Party of President Trump. So what are some of these issues, and how do you think they'll be resolved?
Well, I will say this, Lana, I've always been a Republican. In high school, I wrote papers about getting people off of welfare and into work programs. I mean, I've always been a conservative in my entire life, and so I think what we need to do is focus on the issues that really unite us as Republicans. Why are we Republicans? That's what this is about. And I think going forward, we need to focus on the things in our party that are our long-term goals, right? Lower taxes, less government, making sure that people have their constitutional rights protected, which is what I think I'm doing here for the people of the 1st District. So I think that's the focus of our party going forward. No matter who you support, everybody needs to take a look at those values and make sure that we are being a voice for those values going forward. I'll be serving in the minority, but trust me, I'm not afraid to speak up when it's necessary. And I think that's exactly what we need to be able to do in a civil manner. In the Republican Party, we've had some disagreements even this week, but you know what? That's okay. We all left the room. And we all know that we are one group of people that can come together and once this is all said and done, get to work governing for the American people, which is what they expect us to do.
All right, Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, thank you.
Thank you, Lana.